All right, Brad, I guess let's start with the top few. Who are the best remaining free agents after officially a day of free agency, but effectively 3 days of signing?
Yeah. I still think Tyron Smith, Dallas Cowboys legendary tackle, and I know there's been some injuries there, but at no point when he was playing was he not a clear-cut top 10 tackle in the NFL, and particularly as a pass protector on that blind side. So to me, he still is the best guy out there that can come in and make a massive difference to a team when healthy. I'm sure the Jets are all over it and trying to bring him in. I think Kansas City, frankly, is probably trying to sell him on,
Yes.
hey, come get a ring. You've made the playoffs a bunch, never gotten a ring. But Kansas City, as we've seen time and time again, they set a price point. It's pretty low, and they just kind of hope the player is willing to come play for it. So I think those two teams make the most sense, and I think Tyron Smith is the best player still out there.
Yeah, I've said those are the two teams that I've been talking about. The Jets all the way along, and then the more this has gone on, the more I think Kansas City would be such an amazing spot for him as well. The Jets is obvious, right? That offensive line was a mess. They're making moves to try and overhaul it. The trade for Morgan Moses I really like, even though he's got some injury concerns as well. I think they're doing parts of it. Honestly, I said preseason, the Jets should sign both Tyron Smith and Josh Jones and have the left tackle fixed, right? Tyron Smith's going to play 13 of your 17 games and presumably into the playoffs if things go well. And then the ones that he misses through injury, Josh Jones comes in, you have an immediate ready-made, high-quality backup left tackle that can play those games and not be a problem either. I'd still be all on board for that for the Jets. I don't think even those two deals in combination wouldn't break the bank, and they could swing that. And then for Kansas City, that's perfect. I mean, they had a late offseason flyer on Donovan Smith last year. It didn't really work. He was not good. Didn't bounce back from the declining season he had at the end of his Tampa Bay career. Like again, Tyron Smith comes in and immediately is when he's healthy is still one of the best left tackles in the NFL. And for them, like Kansas City, they don't even need him playing. He could miss 6 games as long as it's not the 6 that are the playoffs into the Super Bowl. Perfect. Like if he's there for those games, you could keep him on dry ice for the regular season and then just bust him out in January and go, oh, by the way, we just upgraded to an all-pro left tackle. Have fun. I love that move as well.
We're going to develop Wanya Morris from weeks 1 through 10,
Right.
and then we'll just drop Tyron Smith in. Or maybe if it's like, hey, we've got a big matchup against, some elite edge rusher. Like, all right, Tyron's playing this one. When we're playing this other team, we can get some development for sure. So I think he's one for me, and a couple others that I think are, very, very good football players. The Kendall Fuller market to me is interesting. We've now seen some movement. The corners have done well. Chidobe Awuzie, 3-year, $36 million deal in Tennessee. Sean Murphy-Bunting had a great contract from Arizona. I know Kendall Fuller is looking for a third deal, but he's played 1,100 snaps the last 2 years. He is versatile as can be. For our grading, he's been off the charts. I think that's a meaningful player left. And then 2 more. Marquise Brown now. I think the receiver market, if you're Marquise Brown, with the Gabe Davis deal and the Darnell Mooney deal as well, I think is very, very good news if you're Marquise Brown. At first, I thought 1-year flyer. Now I think you might sign a multi-year deal somewhere, and I'm thinking that could get $14-15 million a year. And then last but not least, we know he's taking some visits. There are injuries to work through, but DJ Reader, we have Cincinnati signed Sheldon Rankins, which is a move I do love. I don't think the Rankins deal should preclude them also bringing back Reader, but DJ Reader apparently going to Detroit for a visit, and I think a lot of teams should be trying to get DJ Reader on their defensive line.
Where would you what is the best fit for Marquise Brown? Because I think he's in an interesting situation now. He's by far the best receiver left. Like once all these guys are gone, like the drop off is Marquise Brown down to like a Curtis Samuel at this point. So if you are a team, obviously the draft is sort of looming over this. A great draft for wide receivers. There's going to be a bunch of teams looking to add guys there. But if you're somebody that wants to make a significant upgrade on your receiving core before the draft rolls around, Marquise Brown's kind of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, Kansas City, I think would make all the sense in the world. And I'm guessing the same scenario. Maybe they're not the multi-year offer. They're the, hey, come sign a 1-year flyer and be the number 1 wide receiver or, 1B to Rashee Rice, whatever. Come in here in Kansas City, put up a monster season, stay healthy with Patrick Mahomes, and someone will sign you the Calvin Ridley deal next year, right? Like, I think that's the pitch there. I think Arizona bringing him back would still make sense.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of teams, frankly, that could still, again, the guy I probably said this in the show before, but when I watched his tape for the free agency write-ups, like, he was still separating at the intermediate and deep level very, very well. I think he plays above his size. Like, he's good at the catch point for a guy who's undersized. I think he's better than some of the guys that have signed good deals already. So a lot of teams that need a receiver, I think, should be calling Marquise Brown.
I would love to see the Indianapolis Colts sign Marquise Brown. Like, obviously they gave Michael Pittman the big deal to keep him in Indy. I mean, they were keeping anyway with the franchise tag, but they gave him the long-term contract. Alec Pierce, I think, has been kind of disappointing. You've got Josh Downs as a slot guy and more of an underneath type of threat, but Marquise Brown essentially replacing Alec Pierce in the lineup, I think would be a phenomenal upgrade for them. Like, now you got Michael Pittman, the sort of supersized possession plus type of guy, your number one receiver. You got Josh Downs, who can be a really good player underneath and in the slot. And then instead of Alec Pierce, like, waiting for him to randomly pop off for 2 catches, 150, you have Marquise Brown, who's just a much more consistent threat on the other side. I think that would be a really good move for the Colts and for Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, Pittman and Josh Downs are pieces. Downs, especially last year, great in the slot. But get a guy like a Marquise Brown that can add a deep element. Look, I do think Alec Pierce will be more productive with an Anthony Richardson. I think Gardner Minshew just didn't look his way a ton, and it wasn't a great matchup there. But yeah, like, we're talking the same thing. You have the rookie contract quarterback. Yes, Pittman is a good number one, like you said, possession guy. Great for Anthony Richardson. Get him that deep threat element that he can, throw missiles to. I think it's a good shot.
One receiver I kind of overlooked, actually, when I was saying drop off from Marquise Brown is staggering. Where do you put Mike Williams in this ranking now?
Yeah, so Williams interesting. Obviously not a doctor, but look, I mean, I think there are a bunch of teams, Jets and Patriots, I've heard have some level of interest. And then people have mentioned the Chicago Bears. His receivers coach, Chris Beatty, was with the Chargers for 3 years, is now with the Chicago Bears. So a lot of people have made that connection. I think even Jonathan Jones at CBS Sports went so far as to say, like, keep an eye on them because there's that connection there. I would put him in that mix. Like, I think it's Marquise Brown, and then I do like Curtis Samuel as a player. I think he's the next guy now. Maybe he was hurt last year. Tyler Boyd did not look good on film last season, but maybe he was working through something. But to me, it's Marquise Brown, Mike Williams, and then Curtis Samuel, Tyler Boyd, and then the rest. It's like, good players, but like your Josh Reynolds is like your wide receiver 3-4 role type guys.
The Mike Williams thing feels a little bit like it's almost like the narrative is starting to overtake reality with him a little bit. Like, remember when I think when season-ending injuries or when injuries generally cost you like the bulk of the season, it's like, now it's a massive problem. Whereas when they happen just in week 17, it costs you a few games. It's like, whatever. Like, obviously last season he played in 3 games, got hurt, he was basically done, right? But before that, 2022, he played 700 snaps. 2021, he played almost 900. 2020, it was 800, then 840. Like, he's been around for most of the games. Okay, he'll miss some time, and when he gets hurt and plays through it, he's not necessarily all he can be. But 29 years old, who's only really had 1 season absolutely torpedoed by injuries, it feels like this is kind of a buy low opportunity for somebody instead of buying into the narrative of, this guy is just a walking, sick note. He's never going to play for us. Like, actually go, no, look, last year was a write-off. Let's assume that's not going to happen again. We're still getting a 29-year-old vertical threat, contested catch receiver. There aren't that many of those kicking around. If we don't have that skill set on the roster, like, Mike Williams is a very viable option.
Yeah, like, otherwise you're looking at like a Marquez Valdez-Scantling, a DJ Chark, similar profile players. And I think Mike Williams, again, we'll see the health, but it is better than those guys by a comfortable margin. So, yeah, that's the thing that's always interesting. Like, it's about value. Like, Mike Williams for $20 million a year, maybe it wasn't a great value. But If you sign him to 1 year, $8 million flyer with some incentives, you could get a ton of surplus value out of that sign.
Absolutely. I'm just looking down the kind of list of teams now, trying to figure out where actually makes sense for him to land for that specific reason, like the skill set that is missing. Baltimore, I guess, would be a pretty interesting landing spot for him based off that, like the absence of that particular skill set. But yeah, I sort of feel like this is a buy low opportunity for teams with Mike Williams, given the narrative on him right now. Another player, I guess I want to. Where's your best landing spot for Chase Young?
He's obviously visiting the Carolina Panthers today, and maybe that's the biggest bag opportunity, and so that would be the best landing spot for him. I think Baltimore could still use some edge help, and obviously he was in the DMV area, but they cut Tyus Bowser, who obviously is kind of a hybrid type player, but Clowney and Kyle Van Noy, it's really right now it's Odafe Owe and some question marks at edge for Baltimore. Sign him to a 1-year flyer like you just did with Jadeveon Clowney and those type of guys, and do your classic Baltimore Ravens. He comes in, has a great season, and gets you a 3rd or 4th round comp pick. Like that's just that's exactly how they approach it, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Now the chat is going to be frustrated at that, Brad, because I saw earlier they mentioned that we want to send every free agent to either Baltimore or Kansas City, and you're just falling right back into the cliche. Let me give you a team that I think would be interesting for Chase Young. The Minnesota Vikings. I don't know if they're setting up deliberately for 2025, or if that's just the way things are unfolding now that they've lost out on the Kirk Cousins quarterback sweepstakes. But, Jonathan Grenard versus Danielle Hunter, they got younger. They are targeting generally younger type of players, and they're sort of setting up to have an absolute boatload of cap space next year. Chase Young is a perfect 1-year flyer for them. Sort of like the Marcus Davenport deal a year ago, where we get a young player trying to prove something for 1 year. If it works out, we're going to have the space next year to tie him down long term, if it's great for everybody. If it didn't, the dude has so much talent, it was worth the gamble anyway.
Yeah, no, I totally see that for sure. Obviously they get Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel, but could still use more beyond that. So I think that makes a ton of sense. I mean, you can make a bunch of arguments. Like Dallas loses Dorrance Armstrong. They obviously have pieces there, but be part of that committee and see if you can just cash in. Detroit, I think, would make a ton of sense as well. They still need edge help. They signed the Marcus Davenport that you just mentioned, but I think could still use more help there. Like I mentioned, they're hosting DJ Reader, but that defensive line, needs more reinforcement. So, I mean, New Orleans, you can maybe make a case. Get younger. You have Carl Granderson, yes, but beyond him and the legendary Cam Jordan, there's not much there. So there are a bunch of spots that I think make sense for him to come in, be a mercenary of sorts, and then hopefully cash in a year later.
The Detroit one I would love. Like they're the perfect team to take that kind of gamble, and they would be doing it twice, therefore doubling your chances that one of them works out because they already have that gamble with Marcus Davenport. But you're right, like. Same idea. They've got Aiden Hutchinson and Lynn McNeil. They've got some players, but that other edge rusher spot was a real weakness for them, even with James Houston coming back, presumably, to add his weight to that. Like, Chase Young in that defense could do some pretty special things and tee everybody up for, even if it's just him going to get paid next year. Eric Armstead was a player. I think we talked about this off air the other day, but he was subject of one of the funniest tweets that you see in the free agent period. Just, sources say he's expected to have interest. Teams are going to pick up the phone and contact Eric Armstead now that he's available. So which teams and where's the best fit for Eric to end up?
Yeah, I think this isn't even just doing the classic connecting to a former coach, but I think Houston, they've now traded Malik Collins to the Niners, and then, Sheldon Rankins signs in Cincinnati. So, Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, Danico Autry is an awesome trio, and Autry can, of course, kick inside a little bit and rush from, 3 tech alignments, but get Armstead, who's kind of similar, right? More of an interior rusher, but can be a base end, stuff like that. I would love that. Go to Houston and have just a wrecking crew defensive line. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Where else would make sense for Eric Armstead? Let's scan the list here. Arizona desperately needs still impact players of any description. Like, I don't want to be mean to the Cardinals, but you sort of look at the moves that they're making and the defensive line that they're assembling, and it just sort of feels slightly sad. It's like these are some nice players to chew up like rotational snaps. If each one of them was playing 300 snaps after the good players had come off the field, you would feel good about it. But like when that's your starting unit, that's not feeling great.
Yeah, it's not feeling great. Good rotational pieces for sure. Not necessarily guys you want to be starting with. So yeah, I agree there. And then I know Diana Rossini mentioned the Tennessee Titans. I'm assuming there's the Rand Carthon connection there, and they've been aggressive. Like I'm sure Armstead is trying to play for a competitive football team, but you can't argue Tennessee's not trying to be a very competitive football team. So that one could make some sense too. They got to get healthy with guys like Harold Landry, etc. But could be a fun unit if you get him back. Obviously Jeffrey Simmons. So that one makes sense. I'll mention Detroit again. Actually, New York would be kind of interesting too. The Giants, I mean, in particular, where you have Burns and Kayvon and obviously Dexter Lawrence, but having that like, kind of Leonard Williams-y type profile back in the fold would be an interesting combo as well.
The chat is screaming almost en masse as unison the Miami Dolphins, which would make a lot of sense. Obviously, they lost Christian Wilkins to free agency. They just signed Neville Gallimore for basically nothing. But you've got Zach Sealer there. You've got all those edge rushers coming back off injury. They signed Shaquille Barrett to a one-year deal on the edge. So there's definitely space inside for a guy like Eric Armstead to make a difference, but he's not replacing, obviously, Christian Wilkins.
Yeah, no, definitely not. But yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. They've actually, by the way, look, have they lost a ton of talent? Yes. Is their offensive line just a massive question mark right now in its entirety? Yes. I like the signings they've made, though. I think Jordan Brooks was a good value. I think Aaron Brewer was a good value. Got to figure out the remaining guard spots, or maybe Brewer is a guard. He's obviously played both. But yeah, I think they've actually done pretty well if you only look at the additions, not the losses.
Yeah, that's true. They've done some good business in terms of bringing in players. Man, that offensive line scares the hell out of me again for the Miami Dolphins. Now, to their credit, it looked horrendous on paper heading into last season, and they were able to play fine, in part because Tua, from start to finish, had the fastest average time to throw in the NFL. If they're able to repeat that year on year, I mean, that does make the job of that offensive line immeasurably easier in a system that helps them out anyway, right? The Shanahan tree coaching system helps out offensive linemen. So they may be in a situation where they are able to perpetually invest less or have an underachieving looking offensive line on paper and just be able to get away with it. But at some point, you would like to look at the list of guys on paper and feel better about them.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, look, you mask it. The quick average time to throw, and then just what Mike McDaniel does with those guys and protecting them. It's also an underrated piece of that tree. Like the Niners' offensive line, no one talked about it last year. They had one good player, one very good player,
right,
and a bunch of whatever, and they just didn't really. It actually did matter in the Super Bowl, is where it all finally popped up, but it hadn't really popped up and reared its ugly head until then. So they'll be fine. They'll work through it. But yeah. Anyway, the Armstead thing. I mean, his market should be huge. I know he had the arthroscopic knee surgery or whatever, and he's missed time the last 2 years. But when he played last season, he was dominant. There should be a lot of suitors there.
I mean, Armstead is kind of the same story as Tyron Smith, except I think even more acute in terms of you basically have to assume you're only going to get 75% of the season out of him, right? And who knows when the 25% are going to poke themselves up. But I was fascinated the last time around when he signed for Miami. I was really interested that he got full market rate, essentially. Like, there was no discount for this idea of, we know now that he's going to miss 25% of the season. Like, the dude is always injured, and not just always injured with one thing, but you reach December and he's on the injury list with every body part you can think of collectively, and he just gets through it or whatever and gets to the next game. I'm fascinated that doesn't come with any sort of we're going to need some money, we're going to need a discount here, something back, because we're not paying you for 100% of participation. We're paying you for 75% participation.
Armstead's, but yes, I think we went from Eric to Tehran. I think we are going to see in the rework deal that it's a significant pay cut. We saw Tyron Smith had to take a big pay cut last year in Dallas. I'm guessing Armstead's new deal is very, very cheap because, you can't rely on him to. I agree with you. I have more faith in Tyron Smith playing than I do Teron Armstead. Again, they're the same thing. When they do play, they're awesome. But the whole when they play part is the challenge.
One player. Why have we not heard anything? I don't think on Tyler Boyd, who seems to have gone from being a key part of that three-man receiving core in Cincinnati, Joe Burrow's weapons, to just the forgotten player who not only at no point did Cincinnati even consider bringing him back. It's all been on T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, but I haven't heard a mention of his name since free agency started. And given that he was the third part of a really good offense and passing attack, it feels like there should be quite a lot of teams that should be all about bringing that in. Yeah,
so I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania right now. That's why I'm doing this from a hotel room. So I think he might be coming home. He's from the Pittsburgh area. I think there's some interest here, and he could be a Pittsburgh Steeler. They obviously traded Deontay Johnson.
Yep.
I would just say this, like I mentioned it before, maybe he was hurt. I always want to have that caveat because I don't know. The Tyler Boyd on film that I watched in 2023, I wouldn't be interested in that player either. It did not look like the guy that we've watched for many, many years before that. So maybe he was playing through something, but it was, like if I was just ranking off of one season and I would have put him lower on the list, but obviously he's been awesome for a long time before that. But yeah, I think Pittsburgh is going to have some interest there. And like you said, Cincinnati's probably not, so it's probably moving on. I think it's one team to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and he's only 29. It would seem very, very early for a guy like that to just fall off a cliff and start declining and his career being done, albeit, he's been in the league for a while at this point. Another team I thought that would be interesting for him is Buffalo. Again, for kind of similar reasons. Like if you've already got the number one guy, if you've already got maybe the number two guy, Boyd as your number three, I think is a fantastic addition. And if you're buying low because he's coming off not a good season and the price tag, like the market isn't there, like we were connecting them to Kansas City before free agency started. I'm not going to do that now because the chat has called us out for it. But Buffalo, I think, makes a lot of sense as well. Like you've already got... obviously, Stephon Diggs there. You've got Khalil Shakir, who kind of started to overtake Gabe Davis in the pecking order in terms of where the targets were being distributed last year. I understand that Tyler Boyd and Khalil Shakir are both theoretically slot receivers, but number one, like Tyler Boyd is not built like the average slot. The dude's 6'2", like 210 pounds or whatever. He doesn't look like Wes Welker out there, right? So I don't see any reason why he can't play outside. And also, as long as you have the X receiver, as long as you have Stephon Diggs, the guy that can go out there, beat press coverage, defeat physical man coverage from the line, the slot receiver and the Z are basically the same anyway. Like neither one of those guys has to deal with getting jammed at the line. They're off the line of scrimmage if you want to make that happen. So I sort of feel like there isn't much of a difference between a slot and a Z receiver.
Yeah, like you said, especially at that size, like you're a move guy, and yeah, maybe Arizona too. We keep mentioning them, but
right.
As of right now, they have Michael Wilson, great rookie, good piece. I know everyone thinks they're going to draft Marvin Harrison, especially after they signed Jonah Williams last night, but they could use the help too.
Did the studio lights just flash here? Are we about to explode from some sort of power surge? That would be a rough way for the show to end. Why? So same kind of idea. Like, haven't heard the mention of Tyler Boyd all the way through. I haven't heard Josh Jones' name mentioned. And I sort of feel like that dude is a walk-in starter at left tackle if someone actually gives him that opportunity. Is anybody going to give him that opportunity? And if so, where?
Yeah, that is an interesting one I agree with. At the worst, he's the best, in my opinion, swing tackle, if you take into age and all that into consideration. Like George Fant was the number one swing tackle, is what I heard from everybody. He obviously signed a pretty strong deal to go back to Seattle. We don't know the base value yet, but 2 years up to 14 is a pretty good deal, depending how it turns out. But to me, Josh Jones, he's 26 years old, and he's, like you said, like he is potentially a starting left tackle. There should be a bunch of teams. I'm with you. I think it is interesting. I've heard nothing there either. Not a single peep. Like New York, again, the Jets, if they don't get Tyron Smith, and they, I don't think they will at this point. So, I think you're looking at Josh Jones maybe there. Like trying to think of other spots, right? There a lot of teams that have tackle questions should be firmly in the Josh Jones sweepstakes.
Yeah, I feel Josh Jones is interesting. Teams don't like... If you don't see a guy as a starter, teams do not like players that only have one, spot that are limited to one position on the offensive line. Swing tackles, you like guys who can play left or right. You like guys that can play inside, outside. You like that position flexibility of guys that can play multiple spots. Josh Jones has had a weird career where he's been basically bad at every position except left tackle. But when he's played left tackle, he's been good. His overall PFF grade for his career at left tackle is getting on for a full season's worth of snaps at this point, and it is an overall grade of 72.3, which is pretty good, and then a pass blocking grade of 76.2, which is getting towards very good. So, and this includes like right at the start of his career where he wasn't the same type of player that he is now, wasn't as good. But I do feel like if you get this guy and plug him in as a left tackle starter, he's a decent player. He might not be an all-pro or a pro bowler, but like he would upgrade the starting left tackle spot for several teams right now that have problematic areas there. But is he simply being held back by the fact that not enough teams see him as a starter, and as a swing tackle, as a backup, he just has less value because he is maybe like rooted to that one spot and one spot only?
Yeah, no, I don't know. Those guys are always interesting. Where, like you said, you're again kind of just buying on the upside potential, and like compared to the market, like Jonah Williams is a more established, proven, better player. Sure, 2 years, $30 million, and you might be able to get Josh Jones for a 1 year, $6 million flyer. Like, and there's no guarantee that you get the better player for sure in Jonah Williams.
But like, to me, there's so many teams, like Tennessee, right? Okay, they're going to probably draft an offensive tackle in the top 10 who's going to come in and be one of their starters. But let's say Tennessee, let's say Joe Alt is the apple of Tennessee's eye right now. You could bring in Josh Jones, have him as your left tackle, draft Joe Alt, make him your right tackle, and now you just fix both tackle spots in one move. The Washington Commanders got rid of Charles Leno finally. Like, a guy who was... Josh Jones is probably better than Charles Leno, and Charles Leno was an average, capable starting left tackle. Like, you would upgrade that spot again and again for not much money. You're going to be drafting probably a quarterback at the top of the draft, so you're not going to have the Joe Alt or the Olu Fashanu to come in and be that guy. Like, I just feel there's so many teams right now that would be better with Josh Jones as your left tackle.
Here's one more too I got for you, and I was going to say Washington. That's a great shout. The LA Rams obviously just went like crazy on interior offensive line. Are they going to start? I saw they put a second-round tender on Alaric Jackson at left tackle. Okay, fine, but you bring in Josh Jones, and Rob Havenstein, I think, has always been kind of durable and never misses time. But again, if you need Josh Jones to step in for a veteran player that maybe misses some time, that one makes a lot of sense to me too. If you're going to go all in on offensive line to give two guards gigantic contracts and ignore tackle, to a degree, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
No, absolutely. I just think there's so many spots that he fits in as a starting left tackle. Again, like even if having no position flexibility is not ideal, I think there's enough teams that are in need of fixing that one position that he's good at that he should have some value and should have a market right now. All right, let's move on from the Josh Jones propaganda hour. Who else is in our list of top free agents? I feel like I haven't heard enough about Justin Simmons since he got released as a cap casualty.
Yeah, I was going to throw a different safety at you. So let's talk safety market. So I would just say Cameron Curl, I've heard literally zero about as well. Yeah, Justin Simmons, I think after the Kevin Byard deal came through, and I haven't seen the details yet, it was pre-free agency, 2 years, 15 is the report. We'll see what it actually is. Like, if you're Justin Simmons, that's a floor for you, no question about it, right? If you're Justin Simmons, you're like, all right, I'm not taking anything less than this. And I do think, there probably are a handful of teams he's talking with. It sounded like Tennessee, I think, had a conversation. I think Gianni Rossini was saying that he wanted too much money for their liking. But Simmons should have a huge market, too. He is still a very, very good football player, no doubt about it.